Now says en français to repeat your questions.
I didn't know you spoke Spanish.
Laurence, tu parles
Very
espagnol?
impressive.
Non, mais je savais pas que Steve parlait français. Là.
Ouais, tout le monde.
C'est parfait. That's why we're here.
Okay,
Anita, go
je vais
ahead.
commencer et
Vas-y,
ensuite
vas-y.
Dominic. Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. Yesterday was a momentous day where we finalized the action plan with Mexico. I want to stress that this action plan is action-oriented. Every 3 months, there will be an accountability mechanism for us to reconvene with Mexico, and in particular, the ministers responsible for the various items in the action plan, from energy to mining to AI to defense and security to workers. We're going to continue the dialogue with Mexico. So this is a strengthening of the Canada-Mexico partnership, and yesterday was an extremely important day. Prime Minister Carney and President Sheinbaum are both action-oriented, focused on tangible results, and we'll have more to say, certainly, as the ministers in each government continues their work. Thank you.
Merci, Anita. Peut-être je peux juste débuter. J'imagine que vous avez probablement des questions. Je vais débuter en disant que plus tard aujourd'hui, on annonce formellement le début de la période de consultation domestique au Canada afin de nous préparer pour les conversations, pour la révision, je devrais dire, pour la révision de la CUSMA. C'est un processus qui a commencé cette semaine au Mexique aussi. Les États-Unis ont dans leur loi cette obligation eux aussi. Alors plus tard aujourd'hui, vous allez voir le début d'une période de consultation formelle pour préparer la révision de l'entente de la CUSMA. Moi, je serai au cours des prochaines semaines en train de rencontrer les personnes d'affaires, des représentants des travailleurs. J'ai écrit aujourd'hui au premier ministre des 13 provinces et territoires. Évidemment, leur participation sera essentielle. So I think that I should begin by saying later today we're announcing formally the beginning of the Canadian consultative process with Canadian industry, businesses, workers, obviously provinces and territories, in the preparation of the review of the CUSMA agreement. It's a domestic process that's important to inform the latest views of Canadian industry and workers as we prepare for those conversations with the United States and Mexico. It's a domestic process that our partners in Mexico and the United States are also undertaking. So you'll see over the coming weeks activities and opportunities for Canadians and for those that are affected by the recent turbulence in the trading relationship to offer us views on how we should approach the review conversations with the United States and with Mexico. I think it's important, je pense que je devrais juste ajouter un peu pour conclure de ce que Anita a annoncé. Moi, j'ai eu, suite aux activités avec le premier ministre et la présidente Sheinbaum hier, j'ai passé une soirée très agréable à l'invitation du secrétaire Ebrard à sa maison, un souper, juste nous deux. On a discuté évidemment les enjeux économiques entre le Canada et le Mexique, comment approfondir nos relations commerciales. Puis on a aussi discuté les préparations que le Mexique font en train pour la discussion sur la révision de la CUSMA. Yesterday evening, I also had an opportunity as a follow-up to the Prime Minister's conversation with President Sheinbaum and the meetings with business leaders yesterday. Secretary Ebrard was kind enough to invite me to his house here in Mexico City. We had a lengthy dinner. The two of us talked about a series of global issues, obviously trade between Canada and Mexico as a priority following the Prime Minister and the President's agreement yesterday. And we talked about the work that both countries are doing to prepare for the review of the CUSMA agreement. So avec ça, j'ai vraiment hâte à prendre vos questions. Puis Laurent, je vois que vous êtes prête.
Est-ce que ça devient ça votre priorité, surtout avec les États-Unis, la révision de la CUSMA, plutôt que d'en arriver à une entente à très très court terme? Est-ce que maintenant vos énergies sont vraiment concentrées sur la CUSMA et cette révision qui va avoir lieu l'an prochain?
Je pense qu'on fait les deux en même temps. On a encore des discussions. Moi, je serai probablement à Washington d'ici les 2 prochaines semaines. J'ai échangé des messages cette semaine encore avec le secrétaire Lutnick. L'ambassadrice Hillman, qui est la négociatrice en chef et résidente évidemment à Washington, elle a eu des rencontres assez intéressantes, importantes cette semaine, la semaine passée. Alors oui, on est visé, on est focusé sur le besoin de trouver, j'espère, une entente qui amènera une situation améliorée dans les secteurs clés, l'acier, l'aluminium, les automobiles, le bois d'œuvre, vous les connaissez autant que moi. Alors, ces discussions sont actives et moi, je serai probablement, comme j'ai dit, j'imagine, sinon la semaine prochaine, au début de la semaine d'après, à Washington de nouveau, visé là-dessus. En même temps, on a un processus domestique au Canada de consultation qu'on déclenche, qu'on annonce le début aujourd'hui. On va faire les deux en même temps, mais on n'a pas laissé de côté l'importance de trouver une entente. Je pense à mes conversations avec le premier ministre Eby cette semaine à Ottawa dans le domaine du bois d'œuvre, par exemple. C'est un défi national, mais comme dans d'autres secteurs. Alors non, on fait les deux en même temps.
Mr. LeBlanc, why is a bigger deal not on the table, like Mr. Hoekstra and Mr. Carney have acknowledged? And also, what kind of appetite does Canada really have to renegotiate USMCA as opposed to just renewing it?
So, no, I don't want to get technical, Steve. It's not a renewal, it's a review. The agreement exists for a number of years, obviously going forward. The Prime Minister, in terms of a bigger deal, the Prime Minister, I think, answered your question or one of your colleagues' questions yesterday. We'll sign a bigger deal if one is in front of us, if one is available that's in the interests of the Canadian economy, of Canadian workers. And we continue to have conversations around the security relationship with the United States. All of those larger issues are still very much active, but I would say the unique focus in terms of the short-term objective is to see if we can find some relief in those strategic sectors: automobile, steel, aluminum, softwood lumber. Those conversations are ongoing. Ambassador Hillman, number of times a week, talks to her senior counterparts. Mr. Sabia, as you know, has been in Washington in last week or the week before, and I expect to be back in Washington in the next couple of weeks.
The reason I said your renewal is I thought that all parties have the option of now dropping out of it or renewing it for another 16 years.
They do. The renewal meeting could be a 5-minute meeting. Hey, let's get on. Let's just agree to renew it. And you're right, in the agreement itself, there's a 6-month exit clause. But all of those are hypothetical. What we take as encouraging, and I don't want to speak for Secretary Ebrard, but he has the same view in my conversations with him last night, the fact that the Americans have formally begun their process, which involves obviously Congress. It's under American law that they have to begin their domestic consultation in preparation of the review, which is built into the agreement in 2026, for us is a positive sign. They didn't do a more dramatic gesture. They're beginning their own domestic process as we are today. So all of that for us is encouraging, and President Sheinbaum's comments yesterday were very encouraging, and the Prime Minister's as well in that regard.
Minister, there was a consultation last year. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. It wrapped up at the end of October, so this is a fresh round. Beyond just saying the obvious, so much has changed since then with the administration. So we need to
But it can still be true, though.
Sure. But what more specifically are you looking for this consultation so you can get the first cut?
So you're right. There had been a previous consultation. I saw a summary of the submissions. There have been a number of active participants, but if you think in 12 months, a great deal has changed. A new American administration, some of their tariff policies, both the reciprocal tariffs, the 232 sectoral tariffs, and the whole world has been adjusting to a new global trading relationship. So that's why it's important to announce today the beginning of these consultations. We're looking for very specific suggestions from Canadian industry and Canadian workers in terms of what we might advance at the bargaining or at the review table with the United States. My conversations with premiers, I speak regularly during a typical week with a number of premiers. they're coming to us with very specific suggestions in sectors that they see under significant pressure. So I'm optimistic that we'll receive a great deal of positive advice, businesses, workers, provincial and territorial partners, and then we'll have to put that in a context that begins the review discussion. But we believe, some months away from that sort of formal sitting down with the Americans and the Mexicans to what would be the first meeting of this review process. But what's encouraging for me is Secretary Ebrard described their own process, which is very similar to ours. So that to me was encouraging. Sure, Anita?
Could I just add something to that, please? There's an ongoing dialogue as well, cross-border. So delegations of Senate representatives, House representatives have been engaging with government representatives to ensure that the dialogue that is going to occur formally now has already begun cross-border. And in terms of Mexico's relationship and participation with Canada and their viewpoints, these are the types of conversations we were having yesterday, and we will continue to have with them at a foreign affairs level, as well as led by Minister LeBlanc.
From Ambassador Hoekstra, we learned that obviously Canada was approached about a grand deal outside CUSMA. Did you learn from the Mexicans whether or not the Mexicans were approached for a grand deal outside CUSMA by the United States?
But we don't speak for the Mexican government.
No, we don't.
Where
And
Mexico's sitting,
I'll just say that my counterpart is Secretary de la Fuente, and our counterpart in the United States is Secretary Rubio. We had a lengthy conversation also over dinner last night about continuing to ensure that there are strong bilateral relationships on numerous issues with the United States from each of our perspectives while the trade discussion is occurring. These fundamental relationships to the health and prosperity and the robustness of the North American economy have to continue along multiple axes, and that's what Secretary de la Fuente and I spoke about, how we ensure a strong relationship with the United States along those other axes while the trade view.
On the UN.
We learned from
On the UN.
Palestine.
Parler de, et puis we read this in French and English, but parler de la reconnaissance de l'État palestinien, il y a la rencontre à l'ONU la semaine prochaine. Concrètement, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire?
What does it mean?
What does it mean for the
Normal,
concrete steps?
concrete terms.
Can I just add, right, I want to something else to explain. You talked about normalization, but Canada already has a representative office in Ottawa. And even after recognition, we won't be able to upgrade to an embassy because it can't call it. So what actually would change?
Okay, I'll explain it in English and in French, okay? In international law, there are separate processes for bringing a state to the fore. One, and the first, is recognition. Recognition, from a Canadian perspective, is not a difference in the two-state solution policy that Canada has long had over decades. In order for this two-state solution to be viable, given what is happening in Gaza, recognition now is extremely important and necessary, because the viability of a two-state solution is eroding. If I could continue, normalization differs from recognition. Recognition is binary. You either recognize or you do not. Normalization is a process, and the process of normalization involves increases in diplomatic relationships. It involves opening embassies. It involves opening consulates. It involves ensuring that there are processes for transfer of citizens between the two states at issue. So, as you can see, one is binary, one is discretionary, and Canada will retain discretion as will all other states that we are working with. The UK, France, and Australia, we're having deep conversations about these issues with them now. That discretion rests with Canada, and until we see greater reforms from the Palestinian Authority along the lines of what was contained in the Abbas letter, the discretion that we have will be retained. In other words, normalization is completely different from recognition. Recognition is a decision that occurs in a state in time. We intend to recognize Palestine, and that is much different from the normalization of diplomatic relations.
En français.
In French, à la reconnaissance nécessaire, la reconnaissance que nous avons déjà annoncée pendant le mois de juillet, va être sur la table et va être annoncée la semaine prochaine. Ça, c'est une décision, oui ou non, et nous avons décidé de continuer notre politique pour le deux États. Et nous travaillons très fort, très proche avec le Royaume-Uni, la France et aussi l'Australie là-dessus. La normalisation, c'est complètement différent. Ça, c'est les relations diplomatiques. Et on va décider avec la discrétion que nous avons pour avoir les décisions pour ces relations diplomatiques dans l'avenir, quand nous voyons que l'autorité palestinienne ont fait leur promesse que nous avons vu dans la lettre de Abbas. I'm going to be speaking with President Abbas this morning in a matter of hours, and I will be stressing again the importance of the promises laid out in the Abbas letter that we received in July. And I have also been speaking with the Palestinian Authority weekly to ensure that they are cognizant of the need for hostages to be returned, for Hamas to lay down its weapons, for Hamas to have no role in the future governance of Palestine, and for there to be democratic reforms and social programs. Thank you very much.
Getting into Canada?